Good evening, good morning, good night, everybody. And I don't know where they're calling. Actually, I bet a lot of people that are calling in from the UK this time, because Lucy, you've invited a hell of a lot of people to this hangout. Thank you very much. And let me invite you. Hi, Lucy Bainbridge. Welcome to the Stars of Wellbeing Hangout.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I just invited everyone that was on the list, and I've got like 1,000 people, and I just went click, 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 click. So, and then I actually got to the end, and I couldn't invite any more people. So it wasn't like a selective thing. It was just press as many buttons as you can. So yeah, really nice to be here, and I've been watching some of your hangouts, and actually they're really, really helpful. And I've already said this, you're an amazing interviewer. You don't ask the same old questions, which I like.
Oh no, it's just whatever comes to me in the moment. I've got nothing prepared here, nothing prepared.
Yeah. Cool.
But I've been addiction. I've really wanted to talk about addiction, but I've really had some thinking about, because I've never. Have I been addicted to something in my life? Well, I've not done, like heavy drugs or alcohol. Well, I've done a bit of alcohol, but, if I go to the doctors right now, I'll say I have 0 to 5 units a week. So that, to me, that's not addicted, right? And smoking, I smoked for, 10, 15 years. And then all of a sudden one day I kind of went, I don't need that anymore.
Yeah.
And stopped. I can't even tell you what. In fact, the funniest story about that. Do you remember there was a book by a guy called Alan Carr?
Yeah. Read it.
Stopping smoking. Yeah, and the thing on the book said, by the time you read this, get to the end of this book, you'll stop smoking.
Mm-hmm.
So guess what I did?
You stopped smoking?
Nope. I never got to the end of the book.
Yeah, actually, a lot of people say that. But do you know what? But you can watch the DVD, and it's so much easier than reading through that dull book. Like, it's quite dull, and it's because it's going through every single symptom and reason why you shouldn't smoke. But if you watch the DVD, it's an hour. You don't have to make any effort, so it just rolls on in. But actually, that was I watched that DVD, and it did have an impact on my stop smoking when I stopped smoking like 4 years ago now. But there was other factors. Like, I didn't like smoking for ages, and then I watched that, and then it wasn't straight away after that, but it was a couple of months, something like that I just stopped. And I used to smoke when I drank. That's when I used to smoke. But I mean, I've had all addictions, I think. Like, I'm just one of those people that got sucked right in with the peer pressure and then just never came out again, basically. But until I did, obviously.
But there are lots of them, aren't there? You could be addicted to all kinds of stuff. Like, yeah. I've ridden a motorcycle since I was 16, and I've had 17 motorbikes in my life. And at one point I had 6 sitting in the garage. Like, I can't have enough.
Yeah.
So I guess I was addicted to motorcycles, I guess.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. And no one like the problem with the word addiction is that no one wants to. It's got such a stigma attached to it. Like, and this is why it's interesting, because we think that someone who's an addict, like, we label people with addict as if it is something to identify with. But when you don't see it as a label, then actually you can probably diagnose 99% of the country as an addict, because we're always, I mean, it can be anything. It can be anything that you're using all the time in order to distract, like, and get out of the reality or in the space that you're in. So it could be stress, it could be boredom, it could be anger, it could be because you don't think you have enough time, like a good time without it, etc., etc., etc. So it's always a way of getting out of the reality.
Shopping, eating out.
Yeah, exactly. And so then there's a funny line with, well, is addiction even a problem? Because people are addicted to the gym, they're addicted to working, and you know, we all throw ourselves in. And I suppose then you've got to question whether the only time addiction is a problem is if you can't stop doing something that you no longer want to do. And I wouldn't even say that it's in the mind. It's whether if it's a problem for you, then that's why it's an addiction. Because there's lots of people who will drink, like, get completely wasted every weekend, and they don't have a problem with that. That's cool. Like, they really are cool with that, and they'll smoke cigarettes and they don't care. And then there's other people who will smoke one fag a day and be totally like blown away, like annoyed with that fact, and be feeling like it's a real problem that they can't stop. So it's only when you decide that it's a problem, I think, is it that it's a real addiction.
Okay.
And that people will make judgments on you. So this person's clearly got a problem. But if it's not a problem in your own mind, then you're never going to admit that you have an addiction. Do you see what I mean? It's like people may have their own judgments from the outside, but if you're not perceiving your world to be a problem, then you're never going to identify with that label.
So my food addiction, right? You know,
yeah.
As you can see, I don't look much like, I don't know, who should I say, Brad Pitt, or you know, so peer pressure and media pressure might say, oh yeah, you need to lose 2 stone, and you need to you know, get those weights out and get doing some stuff, you know. And I could really I mean, I know people who are constantly on a diet and are constantly failing to lose weight. I mean, I've done it, and then there's other times I haven't managed to lose, and then there's other times where it hasn't mattered what weight I am or not.
Well, yeah, I think willpower, the issue with willpower is that it's an added problem, isn't it? It's like you add an extra layer of pain to your life, which is actually what usually the addiction is taking away. Now, this isn't necessarily conscious, but you know, if you enjoy eating lots of food, usually when you have a binge, it's kind of like a comfort. You're not tend to be like running and being in this great state of mind, and then you go and stuff loads of chocolate in your face. It's usually like a comfort thing. So to then try and go, right, I'm not doing this again, then you've just got all the negative stuff that's going on before you comfort eat. But now you're not allowed to comfort eat either. So it's like an added stress. So it can only be sustained for like, I don't know, week, 2 weeks, until you give in, and then you feel like crap again because you're beating yourself up about it. So really the addiction, whether it's eating or drinking or sniffing coke, or it can be anything. It really can be anything. And I think we get caught up, and this is probably why we get a bit frightened, as you said. And I've had that myself, where we class certain addictions as different to others, and we get very scientific with, you know, how it, you know, what the problem is with each addiction and how that affects the body and how it affects the mind, etc. But actually, the root cause, the addiction is just a symptom. And by cutting off the symptom, like by trying to stop drinking, stop eating, stop doing coke, stop smoking, stop doing all those things, it's like hard work, and you're dealing with a symptom, you're not dealing with the cause of the problem. And the cause of the problem is always thinking.
So it's how I feel about me. It's how I feel about my drinking or my smoking or my drug taking, assuming I do. I suppose I must take some drug. Coffee. There's nothing.
Yeah, I mean, and I was talking to Elaine earlier. She's big on the addiction things. Elaine, I don't know how to spell her surname. That's it, ladies. Right. And I was talking to her, and she said, well, when you start trying to cut addictions into physical dependencies, then it gets really tricky, because then you've got antidepressants, you've got caffeine, and all of these things alter your mind. Anything that you put in your body is going to alter your chemical situation on some level. So it's like we can get really heavy drugs, heavy alcohol, and I think the whole thing about drugs rather than alcohol is that the difference between the two is one is legal and the other one isn't. But we don't look at stuff like, we barely even look at the stuff that are things like people are on antidepressants and they don't even, I mean this is just, some people, you are so freely given antidepressants, and to me that is just the legal version of doing what everyone else is doing with like weed or cocaine or anything else. It's just dealing with the symptom. It's like a symptom. Do you get what I mean? It's like you're covering over the problem. You're not dealing with the actual problem.
No, I think it's a really important point that you're making, that that all of this stuff is us trying to take control of the situation, and like you end up struggling with it more. You end up taking lots of action that is actually not helpful and it prolongs the whole situation in the affair. I can see that totally.
Yeah. And so when you get to the cut to the chase, any addiction is the same, and it will always feel more real for the person who's in it. Like if it's smoking, it's smoking. If it's cocaine, it's cocaine. If it's eating, it's eating. It's like they will always feel like the biggest problem. But the problem is not that. It's that you think it gives you something that you don't already have. So the addiction will comfort you in some way, or give you something added, or give you something extra for you to fill you up in some way that you didn't have before you used it. And so we create meaning, attaching the meaning to the experience of smoking, eating, etc., etc., etc.
Ooh, I'd love to know what the meaning is of my chocolate addiction.
Well, what does it give you?
Well, I know I've been doing this living below the line thing this week. They're like eating on £5 for 5 days to raise money for a charity called Child Hope. And I haven't, normally I would eat, like I'm such a sweetie person, and I would eat, and so when you don't have it, it's like, well, first of all, it hasn't been that difficult, and secondly, you get these kind of cravings. I mean, you were talking about, I suppose that's at the back of my mind is that when you're doing stuff to your physical body, alcohol, drugs, etc., then you're even going to the gym, you're releasing endorphins, etc. You're creating like a chemical change, a mind-altering, I used to go to the gym every day because once I'd been on that treadmill and all the rest of it, I felt so good. It was like a rush. I was on a high, and you want that again. You want to feel like that. So,
yeah. But the funny thing is, now this is where I used to get caught up. It's like 99% thinking and 1% chemical addiction. So sugar, okay, sugar definitely. Sugar, they say, is just as addictive as crack. It's like, it's more-ish. It's such a short high, and then you need more. But and nicotine with smoking is just as addictive as heroin, and if not more so. But because one's legal and socially acceptable, and the other one is, awful, we go, well, that's worse than that one. We just make a decision. But what you just said about the going to the gym, actually, I bet there's been a time where you've got off the treadmill and you haven't felt as amazing as you did the first time you got off the treadmill. And there'll be some times where you get off the treadmill and you just don't, it doesn't give you that amazing rush. You may feel slightly better, but it wasn't like the be all and end all, because you will be having a bad day, etc., in your day beforehand, say, for instance. So I'll give you an example with me when I used to do cocaine a lot. First time I did cocaine, in fact, the first time I did cocaine, I thought it was rubbish. I just did it again because, like, and actually a lot of drugs that I did the first time were rubbish, apart from ecstasy. When you take ecstasy for the first time, I mean, I was like in love. But then I've taken ecstasy again with the understanding that I'm going to feel that way. Like, you remember how you felt. And then you take it and it's not as good as it was. And cocaine especially, like, the craving is just thought. It's like, you need this, you need to have this in order to feel better. But it doesn't make you feel better a lot of the time. That's we've put the circumstance and attached it to a feeling, and we've just believed it is the case because we've had it once or twice in the past.
No, I can get that with my biking thing. Nowadays, I live in a place where for 6 months of the year I don't ride a bike because the weather's too bad and the salt on the roads and whatnot. Whatever. But I don't ride a bike. So if I was addicted to bikes, I'd be really struggling, wouldn't I? But no, for that period of time, it doesn't cause me a problem at all. Yeah. So the thought's gone away. It's not the circumstance.
Exactly.
So I get that. I completely get that.
And I've gone running before in a really, really bad mood, and I've come back from the run and I'm still in a really bad mood. Like, it doesn't actually always relieve the stress, because the thinking is what, the thought, the process of the thought is what is creating the stress. And I've, like, literally used to be, so I think the dependency upon something is where it becomes a real addiction. That's what it is. It's like, you may or may not be dependent on chocolate, or you may just quite like it, right? Like, and actually it's not causing you enough consequences for you to decide this is a problem, right? So there's things like that in my life where I think, well, I don't really care that it's not very healthy, but I still do it anyway. Like, there's certain things that I'm not going to, like, put my will upon and go, no, I must give this up, right? But I suppose it's when you think, okay, the consequences are outweighing the benefits. And then when you're in that space, if you then can't stop, that's when you think, well, I have a problem here, I've got an addiction. And that's when it's time to look at, well, why am I doing this? What am I needing it for? You know, there's dealing with your life and the circumstances that you think are creating problems, i.e. work, girlfriend, boyfriend, or in my case, I just used to find life quite grey. Like, it used to be very standard. I didn't have meaning. I used to find my job quite boring. I just used to find life boring, right? So that was my thinking. That was the problem. So I used anything to be out of that space. And it didn't always create an out space, but what it did is it made me think that like, situation on drugs would be better than where I was, and often it wasn't. But the craving would make me think that it was. But that's where we need to look at cravings as well. It's like, it's not just the circumstances. When you get into that craving state, why do we have to act upon it? Like, it doesn't need to be acted upon.
I want to ask you now, what changed it for you? What stopped you I'm presuming you've stopped. What stopped you from doing drugs?
Well, that's interesting, because what changed was, well, I had an insight. So I was week in, week out in the same cycle of, like, Monday morning waking up thinking, I am never doing this again. Like, really hanging, like, going to work, wanting to kill myself kind of feeling. And then by Wednesday, I was ringing up my dealer and saying, can you reserve me a couple of grams for Friday night? Or if I'd gone anywhere during that week just to have a drink, I would then go, right, I need a line, I need some Coke. And so, and it would be just this cycle. And that went on for years. Like, 7-8 years, like the same cycle each week. And I never thought it was a problem because everyone else I knew was doing it. It was just normal. Until I think it was about 24, and I got so sick of it. I was so like, oh, I hate this. I didn't even enjoy it. It was like I was doing the coke, and as I was doing it, I was like, why am I doing this? And I had and people would bore the tears off of me. Like I couldn't have a conversation. They would just, it was like they were talking some language I didn't understand, and all I'd be thinking about was, how am I going to get some coke? Like it was just this ongoing obsession. And then many a time I'd got ill, or I'd decided that I just wasn't going to do it, and I felt like I'd come to the point of no return, you know, like this time is it, and I didn't. So it's just such a trap. And then I was reading a book and I had like what I call an epiphany, because I'd been up for 2 days, I hadn't slept, I was just about to go through this hellish moment of coming down, which is where you've been up for like 2 days on all these drugs, and then now they're starting to, your body's going to start detoxifying your system, and you're going to go through hell basically. What goes up must come down. And I was so used to that feeling, and I just had an epiphany. Basically, I was reading this book and it said, like attracts like. Your thoughts, whatever you're thinking about, you are bringing into your life. And I thought this book was the be all and end all. Like I was like, oh my God, this book. Because what happened to me is I saw deeply, like realized on a massive scale, which don't get me wrong, like I mean, I had never been spiritual, I'd never been into anything like that particularly. Like quite like self-help, but I didn't really look at it. It never done anything for me. Positive thinking to me was just like, yeah, whatever. And I saw this, and I just saw how my thoughts were the problem. Like it said, like attracts like. All I thought about was cocaine. Like, so I had it. That's all I was doing. All I was thinking about was it. And then, but it wasn't like, okay, now I need to stop thinking about cocaine. It wasn't a cognitive space. It wasn't like I get it, now I'm going to do it. It was like, oh my God, this is the answer to everything. And I just jumped out of bed and tried to articulate this to my drunk boyfriend in the garden. And he was just like, yeah, like really like tried to get on it with me. And I was like, the colors looked brighter, and I was just like in this state of like total, it was like an awakening. It's like I woke up.
Nice.
It was nice, right? Because I was like, well, this is mental. This cannot come from any of the chemicals. I've stopped taking them. This is nothing, right? This is a mental high, right? It was like a switch. And I stayed up there for, and I stopped drinking straight away, and I stopped everything. And I was just like, I started eating like loads of salad, and I was just on this, it was a real like switch. And then I calmed down, and then I did, and this is the thing, I did drink again, and I did smoke weed again, and I did, but the attachment for any of that stuff was like, I don't need that stuff. Like this is like, it was like neither here nor there. It was just like, it just was what it was. Like most people would feel about chocolate or alcohol or whatever they're not addicted to, but they play with. You know, like it's just a nice thing to do sometimes. That's what changed. And I didn't know what had happened to me. I just knew that we could all feel a lot better in some way because of our thoughts. I saw how my thoughts were like everything. So everything I heard after that about thinking stuff, it was like, oh, that's what they meant. And you know, and it's not intellectual, it's not a right, here's prescription and go. It has to come from within you, this understanding. It has to come from it has to be a realization. And so, you know, people meditate, people pray, people, you know, go through to search for that kind of shift in consciousness. They search for it, and then that's what really does something for someone, I think, that shift in perception.
And quite often, so this is my experience, so earlier on we were talking about struggling with it, and you mentioned, you know, every week wanting to stop, and I can remember from my smoking days, you know, trying all kinds of things to cut down, and I'm going to stop on Monday, and all that. I can remember all of that, real struggling with it, and the whole willpower thing, and you know, sometimes I'd stop for a while, and then I'd start again, but when you get to, and this is, I can't even tell you now what made me stop smoking. Just one day I stopped, and I just didn't do it again.
Yeah.
And I love the fact that you know, the only doing here is the when we as human beings stop struggling and stop trying to take control of it and do something with it, when we just let it naturally take its course, then we go back to how we were meant to be, which is you don't need it, so you don't need it.
No.
You see what I mean?
No. Well, we never did, and but our thoughts, this is where it comes into thinking. It's like we identify with the thoughts. So I'm a smoker, I'm an addict, I'm a cocaine lover, I couldn't possibly go out without it. Like the whole story is around it. Yeah, like I wouldn't go out if I didn't have any coke. Like that, it's like you know, my whole life was built around thoughts around who I was in association to cocaine, men, eating, everything, because the thoughts that I think, I thought that's who I was. And so and I think this is a great example of seeing it from a completely different perspective. Is that someone, I can't remember, I'm rubbish at telling stories, but someone said about psychopaths and killers, like people who kill, I can't remember who it was saying, it was someone in the 3P community, was saying how what people that kill do is they just act upon the thoughts that they have. Like, so they get angry and they'll think, I want to rip that person's head off. And rather than just thinking that like we do, they act upon it because they're identifying with that thought. Like that's what it's like, it's telling them to do it. And I see, and cravings are the same. So some people just don't, like, I might fancy, but I'm not going to do it. We get attached to, like, I have a craving, so I've got to do it. Like, I've got to do it. This is who I am. Like, I am this craving, and therefore I'm going to do it. And Elaine was like, they're not commands. Cravings are not commands. They're just thoughts. Just like some people will think, oh, I want to call in sick today at work. Now, how many times do you think that at 7 o'clock in the morning? It's like easy to think that thought. Some people do it and some people don't. And so we have the ability to not act upon our thoughts. They're not who we are. And I see this kind of, you can have an insight and you can listen to this kind of understanding, and maybe you'll have a little insight here and there, and then you'll just find that actually you create a gap between your action and the thought. Like, I see that with people. It's like, oh, it just isn't really there anymore. Like, I might think it, but it doesn't stop me. So like me with setting up a business, it's like, I can't do this. Like, no way, I can't do this. Who am I to do this? What's this person going to say? Like, we build up this imaginary reality, and we think, I am this person. I am not good enough. I am not qualified. I am not I can't talk properly. I don't like the sound of my voice. All this stuff that we and then we identify with it, so we don't do the thing, or we still do the thing anyway, and we don't listen to the thoughts. And it's a choice on whether we listen to the thoughts or not. But I think we have to start realizing that we're not our thoughts, that we are not the thoughts that comes into our head.
Yeah, no, you slam dunked it a little bit earlier when you said something along the lines of that I wasn't who I thought I was, kind of thing. I'll have to rewind this hangout and find it and quote you on Facebook, I think, because it was a really nice line. It's a fantastic line. But I'm still, you're going in there, and I'm sort of more and more as you're talking, seeing innate health, how when we don't try, when we don't try and control it and make it happen, when we don't think it has to be a certain way, our default settings just work for us all the time.
Well, exactly, and that's why releasing the will, that's a famous part of it's the first step in I can't remember what step it is in the 12-step recovery thing. Is like you hand over your willpower to God, right? God to me is just like wisdom, like the universe, whatever you want to call it. And so you just let go, basically. You let go of how it's going to happen. And I think that is massive, because what we resist persists. So when I work with people, I'm less focusing on, do you need to stop the alcohol or the smoking or the drug? Like, you're already doing that loads all the time anyway. So a few more weeks isn't going to like be a problem. But actually, let's focus on how you're seeing that your life works and how your thoughts are making you do certain things, and where you think that your thoughts are, where your thoughts are really creating the problem. And then that stuff drops away, and that's what it is. It's like all that stuff is so up, like it's such surface level. It's surface level. And then when you really get in touch with who you are, and the fact that, you know, we can't touch who we really are.
Right.
With
another thing you said. You are not your thoughts. You're something deeper than that. You're something way more than that.
Exactly.
And I love it that you deal with it that way, because I've met a few people who've been through recovery programs now, and you know, once you get labeled, you know, I mean, some of these guys have got labeled with not just one label, but a bunch, you know, depression and addiction, and you know, then they get rattled into various treatment programs for each one of those, and it's all about for them. That's reinforcing the thinking. You know, this is who you are. This is how you must be. And so for you to deal with people at that level, at the level of, no, you're something beyond that, it kind of gives them some immunity to, when they're being rattled through those processes, to believing them too much, because actually
this is fascinating.
Heading them in the wrong direction.
Yeah, but it's so innocent, and I just really want to talk about this, because I have a massive respect for the 12-step recovery programs, and because it's so interlaced with powerful truth, like the Serenity Prayer, for instance.
I don't know it, I'm afraid.
Okay, I've forgotten it. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the wisdom, the courage to change those that I can, and the wisdom to know the difference, right? So there's a lot of that's so true, right? That's a really beautiful thing. It's like, grant me the serenity to accept things I change. It's like, let go, and the courage to do what I can when you know that, and the wisdom to know the difference. So it's just relaxing, because when you relax, when your thoughts aren't there, you know, we do know what the right decision is, and we can make it, and we can. So it's the serenity to me is massive. And when we and also what those programs do is they surround people with love and community. So there's, I mean, what they've got there is a really, really powerful thing. But and I've got a story around that, because I got very in my head around, well, I'm like, you know, I used to be this way. I used to be totally dependent on anything, and now I'm not, but I still have a drink, right, here and there. And then I got convinced by the 12-step group that I had to be abstinent in order to help others, right? And I got really heady, so I went through the 12 steps and everything like that, and it's really, really good for people who need that real great big, like they've got nothing else, they're really at the point of no return. But what they talk about in there is that spiritual awakening, right? There's that awakening that you can have, and it says the 12th step, you will have gone through this and you will have had a spiritual awakening. And I think that is what changes people, that awakening, that point, that insight, which is what happened to me. And people, when they have that, that's the game changer. Because when you raise your consciousness, the drug or the drink doesn't have any power over you anymore. And so labeling someone an addict, yeah, like you said, it implies that there's something wrong with that person, like they haven't got the health. But that's quite innocent, because in a way it's like, for some people, they don't really want to go back to that, and that's a lot better than being where they were. And it's not for me to say whether or not they would still be the same with alcohol or drugs, but for me, the game changer was the insight and the happiness and the love-filled life that I started living. So drugs and alcohol became like, they didn't touch that. They didn't touch that kind of lifestyle. Like they didn't take me higher than that life. Whereas before I was really, really low. So the drugs and the alcohol took me to a higher place. And then I then became higher. I was higher in my own life.
But that's absolutely perfect, because first of all, I want to go back, and you've made really two wonderful points. First of all, I agree that all of those programs are totally well intentioned, and a lot of people benefit from them just on the surface value of the techniques and approaches and whatnot that are in them, that have been developed over many years. No, certainly not criticizing that. That's wonderful. But the second point that you've made, that I think is absolutely crucial here, and is beautiful, thank you, is that when you see who you truly are, you get there's something underlying in those programs that helps you touch that touchstone once more, and it's that really makes the difference.
Yeah. Yes, that's what it is.
Beautiful.
Because you can't go back. That's honestly, personally, I don't. Once you raise your consciousness, this is just a metaphor. Obviously, anyone who's not had that experience probably like what you're talking about. But it is like living in a slightly different reality. So you just feel a bit more complete. You feel whole. You feel calmer, and you're still going to have good and bad days. But once you reach that point, you can never go back to being on that lower level. So it's a knowing, it's a deeper awareness of a place. It's like when you're growing up, I suppose we're always shifting in consciousness without us realizing. It's just around different subjects. So this, like, I had an issue with drugs, but some people have issues in relationships. Some people have issues with I don't know, let's just say relationships. Like, you'll repeat the same pattern over and over in a relationship, and then one day something changes and you don't. and then it will never be that same way again. So you've changed the way you perceive reality in that area, like you've shifted. And it's the same with drugs. And once you've done it, you're not going to go back to that way of behaving. You're not going to go back. But
you were so right. So there's a lovely bit in my Living from Wisdom product. It was the first workshop with Dick Bettinger where he talks about addiction, and he says, you know, you, on the one hand, if you're reaching outside for the drugs and the alcohol to make you feel a certain way, then that's the addiction. But there's no reason why, if you know where your feelings come from, and if you want to drink because it's an expression of who you are and how you're feeling, then go ahead.
Yeah. Who said that? Sorry.
Dick Bettinger. He's on my Living from Wisdom product. You can get it on the website, but it's a wonderful workshop, and he's a wonderful man, and he's got lots of wisdom in all.
Yeah. Dickens, brilliant.
But I'd love to I'd love to pick up on one more thing, because I think we're kind of getting short of time. But I wanted to kind of come back to your thing about setting up your business, because that's a beautiful place to go with this, because the same thing applies. You know, when you see who you truly are, when you don't listen to all of those stories and all of that history that you may or may not have about what's good, what's bad, and you kind of have the space to create a business, and it'll be your unique business. It'll be.
Thank you. Yeah, well, I set it up, and then I got a bit lost in my own understanding of stuff, but it actually is the same message that it has always been, which is actually giving. This whole idea that you need to give up is the painful part. Don't even try. Don't even go there. Increase your awareness on what makes you happy and what gives you love and makes you successful, and fill yourself up with other stuff. Like for me, it was finding my purpose. It was like really, it was this insight. It was this insight into how the mind works. Like I was obsessed at that point with wondering how is life happening? And we kind of get so lost and so drawn away from the fact that the fact that we're here is a miracle, right? Like it's a bloody miracle. We're all walking around like this is standard, right? And it's not standard. It's like we can't work it out. It's beyond comprehension. And like when you touch on that a lot more and you go into that, you get a bit high, you get a bit trippy. Like you can be high on life. Like I get moments of real you become really so aware that you're alive even, and that can trip you out more than anything, because you're it is amazing. It's like being a child again when you really start to see. And the reason why we can't do that is because when we're so stressed out, we're using such a small part of our brain, like the fight or flight stage. It blocks down all energy systems apart from dealing on that one problem. And when we're dealing with one problem, which is something like I've got to get to work on time, like, and then the next problem, which is why hasn't that guy called me? And then the next problem is I haven't got enough money to get home and the trains are delayed. And we're just dealing with these minor, tiny little idiotic stresses, right? We can't use the full amount of our brain's capacity. So when we start clearing out that, like clearing out all the stuff that you think is stressful, and really seeing that thought is the problem and nothing more, then like stuff like getting off your face is so not necessary anymore. It's like, so it's an easier way. It's so much easier to do that, and it's much more pleasant and a lot more, you get so much more than just giving up the drug or giving up the alcohol. It's so much more than that. It's like you actually become like high all the time. So
no, I totally get you. I mean, there's so many times now. I mean, I call it's a Richard Wilkins thing actually. He talks about squeezing the small stuff, but sometimes, you know, I'll be just out walking the dog, the birds will be singing, the grass will be green, the sky will be blue, and I'm like, Wow, that's fantastic. Now, if you call that tripping, I'm happy to accept that. But it just is being appreciative, being in a place, and so I can tell, you know, when I'm appreciative of life, when I'm appreciative of little things. I'm doing this diet thing right for this charity thing, and tonight I got a French baguette for 10p. It's like I haven't had bread for 4 days now. It's like, oh my God, this is a gift. You know, it's such a small thing, but I'm really appreciating it, and that's been a beautiful thing for me for this week, because so much we taking advantage of the convenience of all our food. Of, you know, you want Indian, you go get it. You want Chinese, you go get it. You want a McDonald's, you go get it. When you don't have that, and all of a sudden a little bit of bread lands in your lap that you wouldn't have had. Oh my God.
Exactly. Do you know what that's also like? It's like, you know, when you've been walking out in the cold, all you want to do is be indoors, and you get indoors and you sit down and you just put a warm blanket over your feet, and it's like heaven, isn't it? And it's like you can start appreciating stuff like that again. Or, you know, when you need a wee and you can't find a toilet and you have to wait to go to the toilet, when you finally go for a wee, it's like, oh my God, this is amazing. So I kind of feel like life stays at that level. It's like you start becoming appreciative of everything, because you've got nothing on your mind, because you don't get bothered by stuff anymore. Like, everything's beautiful again. It's like the color comes back into life. It's like watching the TV in color after you've been watching it in black and white. It is an amazing experience, and I wish it for everyone. It's not just addictions. It's like, I mean, if you want to, the thing is, it's difficult. It's a sad thing that people feel that they have to have a problem before they go to sort this stuff out. Because people used to say, it's funny actually, my skin is really cleared up a lot more recently. And that's because I'm not stressed. Now, people used to say it's caused by stress, and I used to go, I'm not stressed, but my level of living was stressed. Like, it was a constant stress, and I just was used to it. Like the incessant worry, anxiety, depression, negative self-talk. Like, it can come, it's still there sometimes, but I just don't listen to it. It doesn't have any effect on me anymore. Whereas before, I used to be like, this is a problem. Everything was a problem. Everything was bad. Everything was awful. And I didn't think I was stressed, because there was nothing to be particularly stressed about, but I was stressed. And then now it's like everything changes when you see through this stuff, when you have an insight into how amazing it all is, really. So, well, yeah.
And my insight was inviting you on this hangout, and it's been perfect. Thank you so much.
No problem.
How do people contact you if they want to start a conversation?
Yeah, great. So they can email me at lucy@lucyforlife.com, or just look me up, lucyforlife.com. I'm actually starting a stop smoking group, but it's not really a stop smoking group. It's called Instant Freedom, the effortless end to smoking. And it's less about the giving up, more about understanding this stuff, and then smoking will become like, they'll have the freedom to choose whether or not they want to smoke. And I'm doing another one called Constant Confidence, because I know there's a lot of people who feel very unconfident when they're not drinking, and they don't know how to connect with people properly, because they've always, whenever they've socialized, they've drunk. So I'm doing 2 programs coming up, if anyone's interested in that. But yeah, just look me up, lucyforlife.com.
Perfect. And from my part, there's livingfromwisdom.com, which is it's got 4 workshops, just about to be 5 full workshops, sharing this understanding if you want more of it, at stupid cheap prices. And my book, Life Beyond Money, which tells you about my struggle with letting go and all the rest of it. And what I've seen. You can have a read of that. And if you don't want to fancy any of those, just sign up on the page, Stars of Wellbeing newsletter, and just join me on my journey. And I'd love to have you along. Anyway, thank you so much, Lucy. It's been a pleasure talking to you tonight.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, everybody, for watching, listening, and being part of it.
Yeah, great. Good night, everyone. Mwah.